Why America's richest are leaving and not coming back. The convoy rolled before sunrise. 2 SUVs, 1 armored van, diesel breath ghosting in the cold. A driver whispering into his sleeve as they cleared the Bay Bridge. At SFO, a lab team slid frost-beaded coolers toward a Dubai gate. Visas cleared in days, boarding passes still warm and tacky from the printer. Across town, a public school teacher set her keys on a principal's desk. The metal clinked too loud in an empty hallway that smelled like bleach, crayons, copier toner, and last Friday's burned coffee. Outside, a patrol car idled with its light bar dead, saving charge. A spent catalytic converter lay like a tin rib cage where a Honda had been stripped before dawn. Glitter of sawdust metal on asphalt and the faint bite of ozone and hot steel in the air. When the top 2% move first, it's not just tax receipts. It's ambulances, classrooms, startups, neighborhoods. In 2023-2024, auto theft claims doubled in several urban cores. In late 2024, San Francisco office vacancy sat near 36-38%. Entire floors mute, motion sensors never tripping, exit signs buzzing to no one. A teacher priced a flight after her insurer hiked 41% post-claim 2024 renewal. A founder missed payroll because a storm cancellation stacked on a regulator, out of office. Today, we follow 3 escape routes, expose the push factors, and name the first Western city at the fiscal cliff. This isn't only taxes, it's visas, safety, schools, governance, speed. One policy shift is quietly accelerating the exodus. To understand why, we go back to when Western cities broke their deal, and why some places started selling time. The broken deal, when cities stopped working 700 words. For decades, the informal pact was simple. You paid more to live in the great cities, and in return you got speed, safety, and services that worked. Trash got collected, permits moved, schools felt ambitious, police arrived, you paid for time and you got time back. Then the equation slipped. Start with time. A restaurateur in Lowe's Angels applied for a patio permit that used to take 30 days. 18 months later, he was still answering emails from 4 different departments, each asking for a slightly different diagram. He missed summer, then the winter holidays, then the next summer. Meanwhile, a competitor in Dubai opened a similar concept in 9 weeks. You feel it in emergencies. A family in a once stable San Francisco neighborhood called 911 for an elderly parent in respiratory distress. The ambulance arrived 22 minutes later. The crew was exhausted. The ER was slammed. Discharge took 14 hours. Insurance premiums jumped the next renewal cycle, as if the service delay were the customer's fault. At home, small things turned into weak killers. A homeowner in London tried to replace a cracked window. The glazier couldn't confirm a date because the parking dispensation took a week. The street permit took 2. A last-minute inspection pushed it into the next month. Now stretch that friction across a startup's product launch, a lab's clinical workflow, a family's school search. The social contract frayed inside classrooms, too. Parents in New York spent months on waitlists while outcomes slid and special needs support came unevenly. Some stayed and hired tutors. Others looked at international schools in Singapore where a seat could be confirmed in days, curriculum was predictable, and school transport ran like a train schedule. Public safety drifted from predictable to probabilistic. A boutique owner in Seattle filed 3 reports for burglaries that felt almost routine. Police arrived, but hours later with apologies. Insurance renewed with a higher deductible and a stern clause about inventory storage. The shop's margin evaporated not from theft itself, but from the stack of responses to it. Security guards, cameras, insurance, downtime. All the while, the bills went up. Local taxes rose, fees multiplied. A founder in Paris joked that he'd become an expert in administrative Easter eggs, unexpected obligations that appeared after you thought a process was finished. For households and firms, the calculation turned hard and simple. The price to stay kept rising while the time to yes kept stretching. That trade-off, time to yes versus price to stay, became the quiet meter in everyone's head. Meanwhile, work itself left downtown. Office towers lost tenants, vacancy signs lingered. In San Francisco, floors went dark. Cafes closed on Mondays. Transit missed its farebox targets as hybrid schedules stuck. Bond markets noticed. Credit downgrades followed in multiple big cities in 2023-2024. The cost of borrowing rose just as pension obligations and fixed costs refused to shrink, a pattern documented across several major U.S. metros in 2023-2024. Services got trimmed at the edges. Fewer weekend routes, fewer librarians, fewer park staff, and the trims were felt like cuts. Data told the same story people were living. Outmigration patterns ticked up among high earners and skilled workers. K-12 enrollments declined in major districts, forcing consolidations and closures that rattled neighborhoods. Office vacancy rates punched through old ceilings. The push factors stacked: taxes, housing constraints, safety concerns, and the time tax of process itself. Here's the quiet irritant: unpredictability. A tax bill you plan for is one thing, an audit roulette that hits randomly is another. A permit with clear steps is fine. A permit with silent veto points is a drain. Professionals crave predictability because it protects their scarcest resource, time. When governments lost the muscle memory of decisive service, the best people started pricing their time elsewhere. You saw it in Micro. A biotech founder in Boston delayed a trial site because a new local review layer appeared 2 weeks before kickoff. Compensation for staff overtime, idle lab equipment, and a missed conference window converted into a six-figure burn. Across the globe, a competitor advanced to patient enrollment with a green light delivered through a single-window agency. Product, not process, set the pace there. Housing pressed from the other side. In London, a mortgage reset squeezed a dual-income household. In Lisbon, the same family found a rent-to-own deal attached to a residency track, with international school seats bundled by an agency that answered calls on the first ring. The trade wasn't only cheaper housing, it was de-risked planning. That's what people paid for, and what they stopped getting at home. Neighborhoods felt the aftershocks early. A restaurant strip lost its anchor tenant, the spillover traffic vanished, 2 more places closed. A school's PTA lost half its donors when 3 families moved to Zurich in a 6-week span. The remaining families absorbed the gap. City Hall said help was coming. It often didn't or came as a pilot program wrapped in forms. Meanwhile, something else was happening in other hubs. They studied where Western cities were slow and built frictionless on-ramps. Concierge government desks, fast visa pathways, predictable tax rules, and schools that could onboard a child in days. They didn't promise perfection, they promised consistency. That's all a high performer needs. This was the moment everything changed, when the people who most valued time realized their city no longer did. The deal broke not in a single crisis, but in 1,000 small delays that added up to a push. And while services stalled at home, other places engineered speed. The new Migrates, where the winners are landing. While services stalled at home, the landing pads were already built. Start in Dubai. The lab team that left SFO cleared immigration in minutes on a remote work entry, then converted to a long-stay residency within weeks. Their files moved through a single portal. A liaison scheduled school assessments for their kids and set up utility accounts the same afternoon. No guesswork. 0 income tax. The team's CFO ran the numbers on day 3 and quietly emailed the board. Burn extends by 8 months just from tax and lease differentials. Across the strait, Singapore drew a different slice. A fintech founder from London booked a one-way ticket after a year of compliance gridlock at home. In Singapore, licensing didn't feel lax, it felt legible. The monetary authority spelled out the path, the regulator took calls, and a provisional sandbox gave him runway to ship. He joined a co-working floor where half the neighbors were risk officers and payments engineers. By Friday, his bank account was live, payroll scheduled, school interviews complete. Zurich ran on calm. A German AI researcher with 2 kids and an aging parent needed 3 things: safety, healthcare, and schools that could handle a gifted program without a fight. Switzerland didn't flatter him with perks, it offered order. The apartment was ready. The international school had a seat and a plan. The clinic assigned a case manager for his father's meds day 1. His lab bench arrived 2 weeks later, and his team joked that Swiss customs treated research gear better than their own airport did. Lisbon and Madeira caught the hybrid lives. A New York designer decamped to a rented townhouse with a residency pathway that didn't demand full-time presence. Her firm kept its U.S. clients. She picked up European ones with afternoon calls. The agency that handled her visa also found a bilingual preschool and an orthodontist. Costs settled lower. Time stretched longer. She flew back quarterly, but the center of gravity shifted south. Riyadh turned a few heads that swore they'd never move to Saudi. A British media entrepreneur didn't go for the lifestyle, he went for the brief. A content studio deal came with tax certainty, a production license in weeks, and a clause that reimbursed relocation costs if targets were met. He brought 6 staffers. They landed, worked, and sent for families after the schools checked out. Call it transactional, but the transaction delivered. Mexico City pulled a surprising crowd from Los Angeles and Madrid. Creatives, software leads, small studio heads. They weren't chasing zero tax. They wanted a network, culture, and manageable costs. Neighborhoods like Condesa and Roma Norte filled with hybrid teams. Global schools opened new campuses. Flight schedules to U.S. hubs multiplied. The value wasn't just price per square foot. It was the density of talent at cafes between 9 and noon. Then Bengaluru, where an American AI startup opened a second headquarters, not offshore support, but core engineering. Hardware access, compute partnerships, and a recruiting pipeline from the IITs created a cluster that actually argued back in code reviews. The CEO split time and then stopped splitting. Investors followed for demo days that didn't feel like subsidiaries. They felt like the main act. The pattern wasn't accidental. These places engineered pull factors, visas that approve fast and renew without drama, clear rules for carried interest and territorial taxation, schools that onboard in days, not semesters, streets you can walk at night with your laptop bag, hospitals with appointments that start on time, governance that answers the phone. Sector clustering did the rest. In Dubai, crypto firms and family offices shared the same elevators, and a founder closed a seed round in an afternoon after a chance gym conversation. In Singapore, payments, compliance, and sovereign capital sat 3 subway stops apart. Pilots turned into contracts. Zurich stitched AI labs to pharma R&D and private banking. Lisbon's creative class linked with nearshore dev teams and tourism tech venture funds. Riyadh's media and gaming push brought soundstages and motion capture rigs. Mexico City's indie film scene overlapped with creator economy startups optimizing royalty flows through IP holding entities. Bengaluru combined AI research with biotech sandboxes that ran approvals in months, not years. Human moments made it sticky. One founder moved first, promising the team they could decide later. 2 weeks in, the operations lead saw her kids laughing in a new schoolyard and said yes. The head of engineering found a clinic that diagnosed an issue he'd been chasing for months. The CFO paid a utilities bill with one app and never looked back. Capital noticed the body language change before the press did. Cost of time arbitrage sealed the choice. Concierge governance shaved weeks off processes that used to stall products. A work permit in 30 days instead of 9 months. A business license this month, not next year. A tax ruling in writing that actually bound the agency. Time to yes compressed, price to stay stabilized, and the compounding started. Product shipped sooner, revenue sooner, hiring sooner, iteration sooner. From the outside, these relocations looked personal: schools, safety, taxes. Up close, the incentives were designed. Policy didn't chase headlines, it built funnels. And once a team landed and shipped, the signal traveled back through group chats and board calls. It works here. The incentive machines, policy as a funnel. None of this was accidental. The on-ramps were built like products with fewer clicks and better support. Golden visas, remote worker residencies, and corporate tax holidays weren't loose promises. They were funnels. You entered with a passport scan and left with a school seat, a bank account, and a predictable tax ruling. The policy architects knew the moment of maximum friction back home and placed a welcome mat right there. Countries like the UAE formalized 5-10-year golden visas. By the early 2020s, notably expanded in 2022, and layered in remote worker tracks with clear income thresholds. Start with golden visas. In the UAE, the 10-year track wrapped investors, founders, and specialized talent into one category. No local sponsor, family included. You could be out of the country for months and keep residence. A founder arrived as a virtual worker and switched to a long-term visa once the term sheet hit. The message was simple: move first, paper later. While that happened, concierge desks booked medicals, utilities, and school assessments in a single week. Portugal took a different angle: residency by investment with minimal stay requirements. 7 days a year, and since 2023, funds instead of most real estate categories with a clear path to permanency. For executives who'd never planned to live on the Tagus but needed a European foothold, it solved an anxiety: optionality without a lifestyle upheaval. The point wasn't beaches, it was leverage across jurisdictions. Then the remote worker visas. Countries realized that where your laptop opens was the new border. In 2021-2024, many launched one-year permits with renewable lanes, payroll guidance, and sometimes local health coverage bundled in. A compliance page explained how to keep paying taxes in your origin country while holding legal status locally. It wasn't just a stamp, it was a compliance kit. Corporate tax holidays added the signal boost. Singapore's incentives weren't giveaways, they were agreements. Bring jobs, bring IP, bring activity, get a lower effective rate and certainty in writing. Dubai's free zones mapped sectors to regulators that actually answered emails. Riyadh layered in license fast tracks tied to production goals. The policy didn't romance founders, it signed contracts with them. Here, where taxation structure shapes behavior. Territorial versus worldwide taxation sounds abstract until it hits a paycheck, a dynamic emphasized in 2023-2024 relocation guidance. Under territorial systems, you're taxed on income generated inside the country. Earn elsewhere, not taxed locally. For mobile professionals, that's clarity. For Americans, worldwide taxation followed them, unless they engineered around it with exclusions, foreign tax credits, or entity structures. One engineer with U.S. citizenship moved to Dubai, kept filing to the IRS, and still came out ahead because zero local tax plus careful planning lowered his global bill. A British counterpart, non-domiciled under certain regimes, kept foreign income out of the UK tax net entirely. Same coffee shop, totally different math. Carried interest and non-dom regimes became magnets for capital allocators. In some hubs, carry could be taxed favorably if structured through local partnerships or recognized as capital gains. In others, non-domiciled status meant foreign investment returns stayed outside the domestic tax base for a defined window. Family offices didn't need a billboard. They needed a memo that said, "Here's your holding company, here's your treaty network, here's your exit tax risk, now move." Double tax agreements stitched it together. A treaty could mean the difference between paying twice and paying once. Bankers learned the matrices, lawyers packaged them, and the treaty-optimized route turned into a standard slide in a relocation deck. A founder set up a holding company in a treaty-friendly jurisdiction, a trading entity where VAT worked, and a local employer of record where payroll compliance was turnkey. The friction dropped, the funnel widened. Speed was quantified. Start-to-license timelines were published. 30 days for a company registration, 15 for a work permit, 45 for a specialized lab approval. Single-window agencies replaced agency sprawl. Instead of wandering between ministries, you uploaded documents to one portal and watched a progress bar move. When a regulator wanted clarification, they asked once. The system was designed to keep a person in momentum. Then came the family on-ramp kits. Policymakers learned, if you solve schools, healthcare, and housing, the rest follows. International schools reserved seats for incoming cohorts tied to visa approvals. Health systems issued resident IDs that booked next-week appointments. Housing agencies pre-approved leases with utility activation pre-scheduled. A relocation week looked like this. Monday medical, Tuesday bank and license, Wednesday school assessments, Thursday lease, Friday welcome call with a city liaison. No heroics, just order. Digital nomad visas matured too. Early versions were stamps with selfies. The new wave integrated payroll compliance. If you earned local income, you got guidance on withholding. If you didn't, you got a clean letter stating your obligations. That letter saved months of arguments with a home country accountant and a future mortgage underwriter. Predictability again. Policy is a funnel, but it only works if pain back home is acute. When a founder in California waited 9 months for a zoning variance, 2023 case, the 30-day foreign license wasn't a perk, it was air. When a researcher in Paris hit a sudden audit of grant spending, the jurisdiction offering certainty for scientific equipment imports became a lifeline. When a London household faced an unpredictable council tax hike, a capped property levy abroad felt like a contract. Governments that understood this built follow-through. They measured time to yes, published KPIs, and held agencies to them. They created escalation desks that actually escalated. They didn't promise to be cheap, they promised to be consistent. And once the first cohort landed and shipped, the funnel self-filled. Board members called board members, group chats hummed. The incentive machines didn't need slogans, they had service levels and a wait list. The 4 pushes, why people finally leave. There's a point where inconvenience turns into a plan. It usually starts with safety and predictability. A surgeon in Oakland renewed her homeowner's insurance and found the premium up 38% with a new wildfire exclusion, 2024 renewal. 2 weeks later, she swept glass from her car twice in 1 month, the crunch under her shoes sticking to the curb and the smell of brake dust and cold oil in the morning air. The 3rd time, she didn't call it in. The police had been kind, overworked, and late. A report number felt like a ritual. Her insurer added a clause about street parking and raised the deductible again. She could absorb the cost. She couldn't absorb the randomness. In 2023-2024, auto theft claims doubled in several urban cores. She was one line in that chart. Her hospital quietly circulated a 2024 memo about rising disruptions on the commute. Assaults up on 2 lines, delayed arrivals climbing, a map with red circles along her route. That night, she texted a recruiter in Singapore and stared at the 3 dots like a lifeline. At dawn, she found a screwdriver under the tire, someone's failed theft tool, still cold from the concrete and smeared with gritty black. She took it as an omen and put it in a Ziploc-like evidence. Flights became their own coin toss. A founder commuting between New York and London watched 3 cancellations in 6 weeks blow up payroll onboarding and investor meetings. Winter 2023-2024 storm windows. The airport speakers crackled apologies. The gate agent shrugged. The sour coffee at 11:47 p.m. tasted like time burning in tin. A missed connection meant a week's delay on a banking appointment that took months to secure. Meanwhile, the destination jurisdiction offered a letter guaranteeing regulator availability the following week. Predictability feels like safety when your business rides deadlines. In 2023-2024, U.S. cancellation rates spiked in multiple storm windows. Abroad, the regulator's calendar arrived as a PDF with slots. He screenshotted the PDF and sent it to the board with one line: "They pick up." He booked a one-way and slept at the gate with his hoodie over his eyes like it was a decision. Then housing math pushed. A Seattle engineer's adjustable mortgage reset in late 2024. The new payment didn't break him, but it stole the cushion that made risk tolerable. Down the block, a landlord passed on higher financing costs and new insurance rates. The hallway smelled like fresh paint, damp drywall, and blue painter's tape curling at the edges. The engineer ran a rent-to-own model in Lisbon and found a residency track bundled with a predictable monthly line, school seats, private health plan, 10-year fixed rent escalators. He wasn't chasing a bargain. He was buying a plan that fit on a spreadsheet and didn't change mid-year. He taped the Lisbon number to the fridge like a dare and circled the day his arm reset again. The marker squeaked. The sound made his stomach drop. Biotech collapsed for a London couple who'd held 2 flats for years. Regulations squeezed yield, repairs dragged, and void periods lengthened with every permit delay. 2023-2024. A bank in Dubai offered a mortgage on a new build with handover certainty and 0 local income tax. They sold 1 flat at a discount, boxed books by the light of a bare bulb, labeled cables with masking tape, parked the equity, and moved the horizon 5 years forward. The math didn't sing. It cleared its throat and said this way. They told friends it was temporary and quietly renewed the lease after the first school term. The box with the wedding china stayed sealed. The lease renewal didn't. She ran her thumb along the chip in the top plate and put the lid back on. Schooling added friction no one budgets for. A parent in Brooklyn fought through 2 lotteries, won a seat, lost it to rezoning, and then discovered inconsistent support for a child who needed speech therapy. 2023-2024. Appeals, forms, and a rotating caseworker became a second job. In Zurich, the same child was assessed in a week and placed in a consistent program with a clear plan. In Singapore, a family with twins found 2 seats confirmed in days, bus routes mapped, and a counselor assigned who answered emails within hours. The move wasn't about prestige. It was about sleep and a calendar that stopped moving the goalposts. The mother cried in a grocery aisle the first time the school bus arrived on time 3 days in a row, clutching a jar of pasta sauce like a handle, forehead pressed to the cool glass of the freezer door until the fog cleared. Special needs support exposed the brittleness of systems. A Boston family pulled their child from a stop-start program after a staffing change erased months of progress. Abroad, a school contract listed services, hours, and escalation steps. One detail that would prove crucial later: services didn't reset each term, they rolled until goals were met. Predictable inputs, predictable outputs. The mother kept that clause folded in her wallet like a talisman. When a therapist abroad called proactively to reschedule, she realized she hadn't checked her phone at 3 a.m. in weeks. She slept, then signed the lease. The pen left a blot on the last page. She didn't wipe it. Regulatory drag turned professionals into litigators against time. A founder in Los Angeles signed a lease for a small biotech wet lab. Fire codes shifted mid-permit. A new ventilation spec required an engineer who was booked for 12 weeks. By the time the inspection lined up, a city audit flagged an expired form from a sub-vendor she'd never met. Payroll continued. Interns waited. A conference talk slipped to next year because data wasn't ready. She moved 5 core staff to a jurisdiction that granted lab clearance in 6 weeks. The original landlord wrote a polite letter about penalties. Her board wrote another about timelines. In 2023, a similar zoning variance took 9 months in California. Abroad, the stopwatch read 42 days door-to-door. The day the green light came, she posted the lab photo with a single caption, 42. Her DMs filled with flight confirmations and a photo of a packed suitcase sitting on a scale. Audits weren't the problem. Audit Roulette was. A mid-size fund manager in London got 3 HMRC requests in 18 months, each time-consuming, each closing with minor adjustments. Contrast that with a clear non-dom ruling in a different jurisdiction that lasted a defined window. One sentence in a letter, valid for X years barring material changes, was worth more than a lower nominal rate with moving goalposts. He didn't need zero tax. He needed certainty in writing dated 2024, signed with a name and a phone number that picked up. He framed the letter like a diploma and emailed a scan to his LPs with the subject line, "Clock restored." The frame hung a little crooked. He left it that way as a reminder of the wobble he'd escaped. Thresholds trigger wealth flight long before tax rates do. A founder in Paris reeled from a retroactive classification that changed the treatment of his stock options. Another in California discovered a patchwork of local fees tied to headcount that applied after a payroll threshold, 2024 notices. The amounts weren't fatal. The discovery timing was. They looked at regimes where carried interest had legible treatment and where exits were planned years in advance with treaty support. The rumor that rules might change became a meeting with a relocation council. The meeting became a date on a calendar invite labeled Options Treatment Final. The final became one-way tickets. Their Slack emoji changed from eyes to airplane. The office plants were still green when they handed in their badges. Meanwhile, insurance for businesses crossed from risk management to risk transfer. A boutique manufacturer in Chicago saw liability coverage double after a small claim, then wrestled with an inspector who cited a door hinge and demanded a costly retrofit. He priced a move to a free zone abroad with a published codebook and a pre-inspection checklist that prevented surprises. The hinge didn't decide it. The checklist did. In 2023-2024 filings, double-digit commercial premium hikes landed across multiple lines. His inbox felt like proof. He snapped a photo of the renewal and sent it to his partner with 2 words, "We're done." They packed sample pieces in bubble wrap that night, the tape gun shrieking across cardboard like a siren. Here's the quiet number that spooked the room. In 2023-2024, some U.S. household insurers sought double-digit rate hikes across wildfire and theft-exposed zip codes, and in certain urban cores, auto theft claims doubled over 2 years. People don't track rate filings. They track the moment a bill arrives and a window shatters twice in a month, and the broom is already by the door. They track the sound of a catalytic converter saw at 3 a.m., the metallic snarl under the bedroom window, and the way neighbors stop making eye contact in the morning when they step over glittering shards. There's a human moment just before departure. A teacher in Dublin who loved her school stayed late to help a student apply for a scholarship. The next morning she learned her housing lease wouldn't renew. The landlord was selling. She'd been on 2 waitlists for months. The kettle clicked off. She forgot to pour the tea. A colleague texted a link to a Riyadh package that included housing for educators and guaranteed placement for children. She felt disloyal opening it. She felt foolish not to. That afternoon, she folded the school pennant into a shoebox and cried in the staff bathroom because the hand dryer drowned the sound. That night, she set 2 alarm clocks, one for work, one to call the recruiter before she lost her nerve. She made the call at 5:58 a.m. and accepted at 6:12. The tea was still cold on the counter when she left for first period. Individually, these are inconveniences. Combined, they're gravity. Once the first movers go doctors, founders, researchers, their teams follow, then capital follows them. Markets don't wait for press conferences. They follow people who have run the math and decided their hours matter. And in 2023-2024, in city after city, the meter on randomness kept ticking up while the meter on time to yes ticked down. That's when the group chats changed tone, from complaint to itinerary, from anyone know a locksmith, to what's the best international school near Gate A. Follow the money, capital moves before headlines. Capital leaves first because it can. Before the moving trucks, there's a wire transfer. A Zurich banker told me their inbox filled months before any press noticed. Family offices didn't make speeches, they changed domiciles. They opened accounts in time zones that answered on first ring, shifted trustees, and moved holding companies to treaty-friendly jurisdictions. A Miami patriarch with Chicago roots flew to Dubai for a weekend and left with a free zone license, a private office lease, and a residency track for 3 generations. Back home, his museum gala donation went pending and never cleared. The dates didn't make headlines, the ACH instructions did. The signals weren't loud, they were patterned. Private bankers watched client mail go from New York to Singapore forwarding addresses. Wealth managers in London got asked, twice in 1 week, about carried interest treatment in the Gulf. An Italian fund of funds spliced its vehicles. LP commitments stayed in euros, but the GP entity redomiciled where the tax ruling fit on 1 page. When the lawyers start using the phrase certainty letter, you know what's coming. Venture capital followed in a quieter formation. An AI seed fund with a San Francisco logo started wiring to cap tables that listed Dubai, Singapore, and Bangalore as home bases. Their LPs, some Middle Eastern, some Asian, preferred fund jurisdictions near their courts. The general partners resisted, then compromised. Keep the Delaware flagship, launch a feeder in a new hub, hold the next close there. The partners didn't tweet it. They emailed LP updates with new routing instructions. Then came the domiciles. Fund administrators set up shells that weren't shells at all, operational offices with compliance staff, not just brass plaques. Because once an LP side letter mentions local substance, you build substance. A New York growth fund hired a Zurich controller and a Lisbon ops lead. Payroll moved with them. A quarter later, the fund bragged about global footprint on stage. The truth was simpler. The compliance tail had wagged the enterprise dog. Real estate made it visible on both ends. Trophy apartments in Western cores came to market under LLCs that wanted discretion. Prices cut quietly. In parallel, beachhead assets in Dubai, Lisbon, and Singapore got snapped up, often not as homes, but as anchors for resident status. A family selling a Pacific Heights townhouse bought 3 properties abroad, 1 for the parents, 1 for the adult children, 1 for an office apartment near a free zone. Their art stayed in climate control, their capital didn't. The liquidation wasn't panic, it was rotation. A Boston landlord who once financed on cap rate logic couldn't ignore changing risk premiums. Office floors that used to pay for pensions now sat dark. Bond markets had already priced the risk, tax receipts lagged. He sold 2 downtown assets and bought logistics space near a Gulf airport with night flight slots. The rent checks arrived like clockwork. His contribution to the local arts council stopped arriving at all. Payroll migration flew under the radar. Employer of record platforms extended footprints into the same destination hubs that offered clear rules. A Lowe's Angel studio didn't move its brand. It moved 50 contractors onto a compliant payroll abroad, then turned contractors into employees to unlock visas. The team kept the same Slack channels and shipped from a different legal entity. The city logged fewer commuter rides and wondered why sales tax was soft. The answer was on a cap table in another time zone. Banking told the same story. Relationship managers noticed clients asking about FX hedging tied to currencies they hadn't touched before. A Biotech CEO set up a multi-currency treasury sweep. Revenue from Europe cleared to Zurich, vendor payments routed from Singapore, executive comp paid locally in a low-tax hub. The spreadsheet wasn't aggressive, it was defensive. Double tax agreements meant fewer surprises. The CFO slept better. Tax treaty optimization turned into a playbook. One family office mapped out a triangle: hold IP in a jurisdiction with strong treaty networks, operate in a hub with clear corporate rules, and realize gains where capital treatment was predictable. Their lawyers ran mock exits with differing sequences. The gap between good enough and treaty optimized paid for the move 10 times over. They didn't brag about it at dinners. They sent their kids to schools near the new HQ and called the old city every few months to say hi. Meanwhile, private banking desks hosted breakfasts in hotels abroad. The pitch wasn't move your life, it was move your entity first. A Houston entrepreneur who swore he'd never leave set up a holding company in a zero-tax hub just for future deals. 6 months later, his next acquisition closed under that entity. 12 months after that, he, his COO, and the head of tax were on a first-name basis with the head of the free zone. Bodies follow balance sheets. Currency decisions hinted at deeper bets. A hedge fund that once only thought in dollars and euros added dirham and Singapore dollar exposure, not for returns but for operating stability. They built baskets that mirrored payroll geography. They weren't speculating, they were matching cash flows to realities. When someone asked why, the PM shrugged. We go where the regulators pick up the phone. Capital migration created job migration, one vendor update at a time. A New York software firm moved its billing to a jurisdiction with clear VAT refunds. The accountants followed. A Midwest hardware company shifted procurement to a free zone with same-day customs clearance. The logistics team followed. Headlines asked if a city's soul was leaving. The accounts payable system had answered months earlier. Here's the uncomfortable part. By the time an op-ed laments decline, the money already left. It left in side letters, in trust deeds, in bank routing templates, in HRIS country codes. It left in the way boards asked, "What's our exposure to that jurisdiction?" before they asked about the product roadmap. And once the capital moved, industries began to tilt. Now watch who goes next. Industry by industry, who's leaving fastest? While capital quietly rewired the map, industries started moving in visible waves. Not all at once. One sector found the door, then another noticed it stayed open. Speed and certainty picked the order. Tech founders and AI labs went first because compute doesn't wait. A Bay Area team priced cloud credits against a sovereign compute partnership abroad and realized the monthly burn halved once tax, rent, and headcount rules shifted. But here's the real lever: equity taxation. One lab's senior engineer walked because option treatment at home turned murky after a policy tweak. Abroad, a ruling laid out vesting, exercise, and exit in 4 sentences. Their CTO followed compute, not slogans. In a sandboxed regime with provisional licenses, they shipped a model update 6 weeks earlier than their rival. Investors noticed the cadence and started visiting, then wiring. A rival stayed put and found that recruiting into an 18-month permit cycle felt like trying to sprint in sand. Biotech wasn't far behind. R&D hates uncertainty even more than software does. A Boston principal investigator lost a quarter waiting for a local IRB re-review triggered by a procedural change. Across the ocean, an accelerated approval sandbox cleared a first-in-human protocol in under 2 months, with pre-scheduled inspection windows that actually happened. Lab fit-out there came with a checklist and a date. The centrifuges spun on schedule. A postdoc who once assumed science meant Boston or San Diego toured a cluster in Singapore and saw something simple: regulators who talked to scientists like partners. A Swiss lab offered her housing within walking distance, and a school that could handle bilingual progression. She signed the contract the day the grant arrived because the timelines aligned. Meanwhile, her old lab wrote a bridge request to cover idle equipment time. Crypto and fintech moved where licensing clarity met bank accounts that opened. In London, a founder endured 3 banks declining a compliant entity without explanation. In Dubai, the regulator asked for a stack of documents on Monday and issued a preliminary license on Friday. The bank manager showed up at the office with a card printer. Compliance didn't relax, it got legible. A payment startup that spent 9 months chasing e-money authorization at home found an equivalent category abroad in a fraction of the time and began onboarding merchants immediately. The board didn't debate philosophy. They measured chargeback rates and settlement times, and they followed the faster rails. Media and the creator economy pivoted through tax treatment and IP holding structures. A producer with spiky earnings and international distribution built an IP holdco in a jurisdiction designed for royalty flows. Instead of arguing annually over source-based withholding with 3 tax authorities, she routed through a treaty network that settled disputes on paper, once. A YouTube production house shifted its edit suite to a free zone with visa lanes for freelancers. Their editors stopped juggling expired permits and started cutting. Ad splits didn't change, friction costs disappeared. When a platform offered an advance to lock in exclusivity, the company routed the deal through the new entity, and the cash showed up without an extra audit loop. The creative leads called it breathing room. Healthcare professionals moved because visas finally treated them like the scarce resource they are. A pediatric anesthesiologist sick of unpredictable schedules and rising malpractice premiums took a pathway that recognized her credentials in weeks, not years. Pay wasn't just higher. Malpractice risk was bounded by a published schedule. Hospitals bundled housing and school placement because they understood the bottleneck wasn't salary, it was family stability. A nurse manager who'd floated between units in Chicago landed in a hospital where staffing ratios were enforced by software and supervisors backed the numbers. She called home after the first week and talked about the shock of finishing a shift on time. Manufacturing leadership and hardware engineers surprised themselves by going, too. Precision tooling firms looked at customs delays and insurance on domestic freight, and then toured a free zone with same-day clearance, bonded storage, and midnight cargo slots. A plant manager who'd memorized the 30-step dance for importing a single part watched a streamlined process that required 3. He moved a pilot line to test the math, and then moved himself because the pilot hit yield targets a quarter early. Vendors followed the purchase orders. Academia and research began an awkward shuffle. A mid-career physicist hearing about grant uncertainty applied abroad as a test and got a lab package with tenure-track terms, guaranteed compute, and a relocation stipend that actually covered relocation. He hated leaving students. He also couldn't map a 5-year plan at home. When a new administration sent combative signals toward top universities, a cohort that once thought of itself as rooted sent CVs. Some didn't leave the West. They went to Zurich or Singapore. Others took Gulf research chairs because the equipment lists were greenlit in a week. The labs filled, the preprints carried new institutional addresses. Legal and finance talent chased deal flow and certainty. Fund counsel who built practices around Delaware and London learned treaty webs and stayed billable. Controllers who could operate multi-entity structures across 3 currencies found themselves courted. Payroll leads who could run employer of record transitions became headhunters' favorite calls. It sounds dry, but these are the people who turn a relocation from an idea into a functioning company in 6 weeks. They're going where their playbooks match the rules. Across each sector, the pattern repeats. Licensing clarity plus visa speed plus predictable tax equals earlier revenue. Earlier revenue funds better teams ship faster, and speed compounds. The ones leaving fastest aren't chasing novelty. They're following the shortest path from plan to product. Speed wins, time to S versus death by process. Here S where the gap turns into a chasm, time. In one city, approvals arrive like a train schedule. In another, they meander like a lost package. The difference isn't philosophy, it's throughput. And throughput decides who ships, hires, and survives. Start with a lab that needed 3 things: a wet room permit, a hazardous material clearance, and a clinic partnership sign-off. Abroad, they uploaded documents on Monday, got a joint inspection Friday, and a green light the following Wednesday. 11 days end-to-end. The same lab sister team tried at home. 18 months later, they were still reconciling contradictory notes from 3 agencies that didn't talk. Payroll never pauses. Burn is a metronome. 11 days versus 18 months becomes existential. While that was happening in New York, a founder in Austin thought he'd picked the fast option. He hadn't. The city's single department sign-off hit a parade of sub-approvals. Fire, zoning, health, signage, wastewater, each with its own portal and password reset purgatory. He lost a product cycle and a hire who couldn't wait. Unknown to him across town, a multinational got a concierge liaison who smoothed the same path in weeks. The message landed: speed exists, but not for everyone. Single-window agencies aren't slogans when they work. In Singapore, a regulator called the founder directly to ask one clarifying question, logged the answer, and moved the file. In Dubai, a case officer pinged a WhatsApp group with a timeline and hit it. In Zurich, the clerk emailed as soon as the missing form arrived. No weekly batch, no bureaucratic delay, just the next step now. The founder's calendar filled with product reviews, not permit babysitting. He felt that in his bones. Death by process hides in the spaces between departments. A biotech fit-out failed an inspection on a duct that met the published spec because the inspector used a newer spec that wasn't online yet. Appeal took 6 weeks. The landlord ate the delay, the startup ate the payroll. Meanwhile, the rival abroad received a pre-inspection checklist with exact references and an engineer's number. They passed the first time. Weeks saved aren't just weeks. They're runway, hiring, and investor confidence. Public-private concierge models turned government into a team sport. In Riyadh, the media entrepreneur wasn't guessing. A liaison walked him across agencies like a guide with keys, collecting signatures in a day. A KPI dashboard showed average times, not averages that lie, real medians with outliers flagged. When a step slipped, someone owned the slip and fixed it. He closed his first contract before his old city would have confirmed his appointment. Compute access can be a speed function too. An AI lab waiting for a domestic grant to unlock GPU credits watched a sovereign partner abroad offer immediate capacity tied to milestones. Credits live today beat credits promised tomorrow. They shipped a demo on week 4. Their competitors scheduled a meeting. The compounding effect turns a single fast decision into a cascade. Approvals in weeks mean a product ships this quarter. Revenue this quarter funds 2 senior hires. Those hires unblock the next feature. That feature closes the enterprise pilot sitting in limbo. Cash arrives early, reducing dilution. The board breathes. Repeat that loop 3 times and you're a category leader instead of a cautionary tale. Here's a micro story. A robotics startup needed a sidewalk permit to test delivery bots. In one Western city, the application triggered public comment and 3 separate hearings. Delays turned into a seasonal miss. No holiday pilot, no viral footage, no buyer urgency. Abroad, a predefined sandbox corridor existed. The company signed a compliance sheet, ran telemetry to a shared dashboard, and rolled within 30 days. When a sensor faulted, the regulator saw it in real time and texted the engineer a photo. Partners loved the posture, firm rules, fast feedback. What nobody knew at the time, the fast hubs measure refusal speed too. If the answer is no, they say no quickly with reasons. Teams pivot. The costliest outcome in slow cities isn't a no, it's a maybe stretched over quarters. That uncertainty bleeds morale, burns capital, and kills prototypes off camera. There's a cultural piece, escalation. In legible systems, escalation isn't a threat, it's a tool. The founder pings an escalation desk, uploads the thread, and a senior official replies with a decision window. In legacy systems, escalation means CCing another address and hoping. Hope isn't governance. A team cannot plan on hope. While that was happening, bond markets priced the cost of slow. Cities with process sprawl bled commercial activity, vacancies rose, revenue fell. The agencies inside them fell further behind, causing more delay. Meanwhile, the hubs that honored time kept outgrowing their capacity and still hit their service levels. It wasn't magic. It was queuing theory resourced. The lesson hit founders first, then everyone else. Speed isn't a perk. It's infrastructure. If your city can't deliver a predictable yes or a fast no, it's taxing your scarcest resource without passing a law. Teams will leave to buy back their hours. And the places that sell time reliably will keep winning. One approval, one shipment, one hire, one quarter at a time. The municipal math, when revenues fall apart. Speed is infrastructure, and when it slips, the math shows up in ledgers. You feel it first in empty floors. Office vacancies don't just darken windows. They punch holes in property tax rolls that cities quietly rely on. In San Francisco, by late 2024, downtown office vacancy hovered in the mid to high 30% range, approximately 36–38%, a series peak. That isn't a statistic. That's a missing check to the general fund, and every missing check forces choices. Property tax is the quiet backbone. When an office tower's assessed value gets appealed down because leases vanish, the city loses twice. Less tax now and lower comps for the next appeal. Landlords negotiate reductions with spreadsheets that prove the market has moved. Finance directors watch projections drift from black to gray. Meanwhile, retail that fed on office workers thins out. Sales tax softens as the lunch crowd turns into leftovers at home. Transit feels the hit next. Farebox recovery was always tight. Hybrid work turned tight into an air gap. Fewer riders, fewer fares, and a fixed rail schedule designed for a world that doesn't commute 5 days anymore. The gap has to be filled by the same general fund that just lost property tax. Push here, it bulges there. Maintenance gets deferred, then breaks on a Tuesday morning rush. Pensions sit like granite in the middle of the table. You can't cut them with a press conference. They're promises backed by law, compounded by lifespans, and linked to investment returns you don't control. Chicago's numbers are a postcard from the edge. On the order of the mid-$50 billions in unfunded city pension liabilities as of 2023–2024, with additional teacher and retiree health obligations layered on top. Credit agencies read the same tables and tighten the screws. Borrowing costs rise while revenues fall. That spread is the sound of services being squeezed. Elastic costs flex, inelastic ones don't. Parks can trim hours, police and fire rotations can't. Trash pickup shifts a day, debt service doesn't. Cities cut where they can, weekend library hours fade, pool seasons shrink, rec centers close early. Residents don't read the budget, they feel the missing lifeguard and the darkened stacks. The feedback loop sets in. Slightly worse services push a few more families out. Fewer taxpayers push the budget tighter. The next cut lands closer to bone. Bond markets don't do sentiment. They price risk. When multiple large cities took downgrades in the same season, it wasn't a vendetta. It was a model picking up weaker revenues against heavier fixed costs. Higher yields attract buyers, sure, but they extract their price. Every new issuance costs more. Refinancing windows become cliff edges. A miss triggers a scramble. Finance committees start every meeting with a debt calendar like a pilot scanning instruments. Meanwhile, downtown's hollow and conversion dreams hit zoning realities. Those empty offices, converting them into apartments sounds clean on a panel. In practice, plates are too deep, windows too narrow, plumbing cores wrong, seismic codes unforgiving. The cap stack doesn't pencil without subsidies that don't exist because, see above, the general fund is wheezing. A few clever projects happen, the rest wait for a program that never launches. Transit agencies keep swinging. They beg for temporary backfills from the state or federal pots that ballooned during COVID and are now tapering. Temporary becomes structural when ridership never fully returns. You can cut frequency to save money, but you also cut the reason riders come back. A spiral isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a quiet ratchet, one headway at a time. There's a line in budget meetings that stings. We're solvent on paper. It means accrual tricks and timing shifts keep the legal requirement intact while real costs are pushed forward. 54 of the 75 largest U.S. cities recently faced that math, reported in 2023-2024 assessments. Not enough assets to cover long-term bills. The short-term fix is fees, parking, permits, penalties. But fees behave like taxes for the people who pay them, and the people who pay them happen to be the ones who can still leave. Open-loop moment. One U.S. city sits closer to the edge than the rest. You can see it in the trifecta: vacancies high, pension loads heavy, debt service rising. The name is coming, not to doom it, but to show what the cliff looks like from the guardrail. Before collapse, neighborhoods feel the math first. A school closure saves budget lines but tears roots through morning routines. A bus line cut saves fuel but isolates a clinic from its patients. A grant that used to fund a youth program sunsets. The nonprofit director calls donors who already changed zip codes. The city announces a pilot to fix something basic: permits, safety, housing. But the pilot requires an application that takes a Saturday to complete. People with options don't apply. People without options wait. Credit downgrades filter down to contractors who tack on risk premiums. A small construction firm says yes, but adds weeks and dollars to cover city pay cycles that slowed. Housing projects that might have added supply stall because capital got nervous. The dashboard says pipeline. The crane count says pause. Here's the part that's hardest to say out loud. Service cuts don't just reflect revenue loss, they accelerate it. A family leaves when the second school closes, not the first. A business moves after the third burglary, not the second. The line is personal, not statistical, but when enough people hit it at once, the budget becomes a mirror. Cities can reverse spirals. Some will. But right now, in too many cores, the math is doing what math does, balancing. And that balancing shows up as fewer hours, fewer routes, fewer open windows at the permit counter, and more letters from bond desks using words like Outlook negative. Before the accountants finish their slides, neighborhoods will write the story for them. Neighborhood aftershocks, the human map. Before the accountants finish their slides, neighborhoods start keeping score. You hear it in the echo of an empty school auditorium. On a Tuesday in Oakland, parents line up to read a notice taped to the door: consolidation. The principal's voice carries across folding chairs. Buses will reroute, sibling placements may change, counseling will transition. A mother who walks 2 jobs does the math on a longer commute for her son. Her margin disappears. The PTA treasurer stares at a spreadsheet with a hole where a marquee donor used to be. Restaurant rows lose rhythm first. In downtown Portland, a chef locks up after lunch and keeps the lights off for dinner. Office foot traffic that once paid for dishwashers and overtime evaporated. A landlord offers a rent deferral, but suppliers won't. 2 doors down, a cafe sells its espresso machine to a pop-up in a neighborhood that still hums at 8 a.m. The owner tells staff there, on call. One finds a steadier shift in Dubai, because the relocation package included visa support for spouses. Safety isn't just incidents, it's perception-bending routines. In Midtown Manhattan, a yoga studio moves its last class from 9 p.m. to 7. Attendance drops. The block feels thinner, so the boutique next door hires a guard for weekends. Insurance nudges premiums up again. A musician who once played late sets starts earlier and loses tips. He says it's temporary. It keeps going. Landlords try to pivot. In Minneapolis, a developer pitches an office-to-residential conversion with sunlight diagrams and warm renderings. The zoning board smiles but asks for variances, affordability tiers, seismic upgrades, and a parking plan that doesn't exist. Months pass. Financing ages. The crane stands still while the coffee cart leaves. Mismatched codes don't feel like policy. They feel like gravity pulling projects down. Microstories settle into patterns. A Chicago pediatric nurse sells her condo after her hospital merges and redraws schedules. Her childcare falls apart when the after-school program closes. The director lost donors when 3 families moved to Zurich. She takes an offer from a hospital abroad that bundles school placement and a predictable shift map. The family that rented her place lasted 6 months before remote work gave them permission to try Lisbon. Parents compare notes in WhatsApp groups. A San Jose father learns that his daughter's special needs aide is leaving mid-year. There's no replacement in sight. A friend in Singapore texts a photo of a printed schedule with specialist appointments fixed for the term. The comparison isn't fair across systems, but fairness isn't the metric. Predictability is. The father calls a relocation consultant that night. By the weekend, the group chat fills with questions about international schools and vaccination records. Cultural institutions feel donor flight in slow motion. A museum in Boston plans a contemporary wing. The named gift disappears when a family office redomiciles. The gala chair promising to close the gap quietly steps down. A symphony trims its season and leans harder on corporate sponsors whose logos don't show up on the marquee because those sponsors cut marketing budgets when downtown empties. The ushers still smile. The mezzanine has whole rows unsold. Nonprofits that fill the gaps become acrobats. A youth center in Philadelphia loses its largest foundation grant and tries to replace it with 10 small ones. The executive director writes nights and weekends, wins a few, and still lays off a counselor. Kids who depended on that hour after school drift. A block away, a corner store adds plexiglass. The owner shrugs, margins, shoplifting, staff safety. Transitional inequality shows up like a map overlay. The people with agency leave early and cleanly, portable skills, new visas, housing arranged. The people who stay weather service cuts, longer bus waits, and schools that shuffle staff mid-year. A teacher in San Francisco watches 3 of her best students disappear over spring break. Their parents found seats in Zurich and Singapore. She holds a class meeting about change. The students nod. Homework completion drops for the ones now commuting across town. Street-level entrepreneurs adapt where policy hesitates. In Los Angeles, a food truck collective negotiates shared security and a rotating cleanup team because the city's promised activation arrives as a pilot with no staff. They make it work until one permit lapse triggers a sweep. Meanwhile, a creator studio downsizes and goes hybrid across 2 cities. The editing team in Mexico City meets deadlines. The LA set gets used twice a week, and the landlord renegotiates again. Meanwhile, destination neighborhoods absorb newcomers fast. In Dubai, a condo building's WhatsApp group becomes a diaspora town square. School tips, pediatrician referrals, jogging routes, quiet rules, a pattern widely reported by 2023-2024 arrivals. In Lisbon, a co-working space starts a weekly founders' lunch, 3 seed rounds close at the same table. In Zurich, an international school adds a counselor who understands the grief of leaving and the thrill of stability. Receiving cities invest in the social scaffolding that departing cities can't staff right now, because their service levels kept capacity through 2023-2024 while others trimmed. Back home, small fixes still matter. A precinct captain targets burglary rings, calls drop. A city finally deploys a real single-permit portal, contractors cheer. A charter school opens a campus near transit, families exhale. The exodus isn't destiny, but until the core systems regain speed and predictability, the human map will redraw itself, one lease end, one school notice, one whispered conversation at a kitchen table at a time. Building new lives, integration on the other side. Arrival day doesn't feel like arrival. It feels like paperwork and jet lag. Then the systems start catching you. In Dubai, the lab team woke up to a message from their city liaison. Residency cards ready at 2, bank appointment at 3, school uniform fitting at 5. By dinner, the utilities app showed green lights across water, power, internet. The head of ops texted the board. It's weird how little friction there is. Private security is ambient, not looming. Guards are present without theatrics. Hallways are lit. Underground parking is clean. A software lead who'd stopped taking evening walks in San Francisco found himself pacing a quiet promenade at 10 p.m., headphones in, thinking about code instead of shadows. Safety, as it turns out, frees up cognitive load. He pushed a fix that night he'd been dodging for weeks. Utilities behave. In Singapore, a founder laughed when the power flickered once, then realized the building's backup had kicked in and the meeting never dropped. Hospitals run like airports should. Check-in, triage, treatment, discharge, predictable blocks. A pediatrician assigned to a newly arrived family called the next morning to ask about allergies and schedules. The parent hung up and stared at the phone like it had performed a trick. Rules are clear, even when they're strict. A media entrepreneur in Riyadh learned quickly that some lines aren't crossed and some topics need finesse. He adjusted scripts, met compliance, and shipped shows without the open-ended debates he'd grown used to. Not better or worse, just bounded. He hired a local producer who knew the edges by instinct and discovered that constraints can make creative choices sharper. He also learned to keep a jacket in the office for surprise formal meetings. Small norms matter. International schools become the hinge. In Zurich, the AI researchers' kids were assessed on Thursday and placed Monday with a plan anyone could read. One teacher flagged a math gap and handed a one-page roadmap. The bus route app pinged at 7:04 each morning. No drama, just routine. In Lisbon, the designer's child joined a bilingual classroom that honored the old language while carving a new one. And parents, night turned into a diaspora mixer with tax questions kept politely off the table. Healthcare onboarding is the other hinge. A nurse in Singapore explained the system in 20 minutes flat. GP first, specialist by referral, emergency when it's real. She penciled the family into flu shots, dental, eye checks, and left a card with a personal number that actually connected. In Dubai, a specialist clinic assigned a case coordinator who booked 3 follow-ups before anyone remembered to ask about insurance. The card on the desk already matched the policy to the hospital's system. Community forms faster than it sounds. Clubs matter. A founder who hated networking found himself at a Wednesday paddle game introduced by a CFO who'd arrived 6 months earlier. The WhatsApp thread replaced the missing uncle who usually knows a guy. In Mexico City, a carking host started a Friday film screening that became a steady pipeline for collaborators and babysitter recommendations. Diaspora nodes build bridges you cross without noticing. Cultural friction shows up in small surprises. Speech norms differ. A Londoner in Singapore learned to reduce sarcasm in emails. It didn't travel. A Californian in Zurich learned replies can be blunt without being hostile. In Riyadh, mixed-gender workspaces weren't the default. He adapted, asked questions, and stopped assuming. Lifestyle trade-offs follow. Alcohol availability, weekend rhythms, prayer times shaping schedules. People recalibrate. Some thrive. A few quietly count days and plan the next move. Secondary migration is real. The media team in Riyadh promised families a test year. One producer left after 6 months. Schools were fine, but the spouse didn't settle. Another doubled down, bought an apartment, and enrolled in evening Arabic. In Lisbon, a family loved the rhythm but moved again to Zurich for a special needs program that fit better. Mobility isn't failure, it's iteration. The common thread is optionality, built deliberately on day one. Work finds a new cadence. In Bengaluru, the CEO who split time stopped splitting when stand-ups in IST outperformed late-night PSD status reports. Investors adjusted call times. A board member flew quarterly instead of monthly and admitted the product velocity justified the miles. In Dubai, the lab's logistics fell into a groove. Customs pre-clearance on Tuesdays, reagent restock Thursdays, experiments balanced around school events because the calendars were fixed months out. Meanwhile, ties back home don't vanish. Grandparents visit. Old neighborhoods sit in saved map lists. Donations still go out, sometimes smaller, sometimes redirected to a program that survived cuts. A teacher mails a class drawing across continents. People keep the pieces that matter, but the day-to-day loyalty shifts to the place that answers the phone. Integration feels complete the day a small plan survives contact with reality. The bus arrives, the clinic calls back, the permit posts online with a green check, the kids argue about homework in 2 languages, and the founder goes to bed thinking about product, not process. It isn't utopia, it's functioning. And functioning after years of friction feels like wealth. The counterplay, who's fighting back and how. Turnarounds start with someone owning the delay. In one Midwestern city, the mayor sat with a whiteboard and circled the bottlenecks: permits, safety, tax certainty, schools. Then he did something rare. He put a clock next to each and published it. Contractors rolled their eyes, then watched approvals hit the posted windows. A drywall crew that had stopped bidding came back. Speed signaled seriousness. Streamlined permits aren't slogans when inspectors show up on time. Phoenix launched a true single-portal pilot with pre-inspection checklists that matched field practice. A code supervisor parked his desk in the lobby twice a week for live triage. A cafe expansion cleared in 21 days. The owner posted a thank you and, more importantly, hired 2 people he'd been delaying. Meanwhile, a neighboring suburb copied the playbook and cut its own cycle by half. Copying is progress. Safety-focused policing is finding its footing where commanders marry data to presence. In Dallas, a burglary spike near small retailers triggered a focused operation. Detectives embedded with patrol, prosecutors in the weekly briefings, insurance reps looping in patterns. Calls dropped, but so did the dread that kept lights off at night. Businesses extended hours. A corner felt normal again. Safety doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be consistent. Tax certainty beats tax breaks. In Chicago's Orbit, a county official issued a binding guidance program, 5-page letters that set treatment for options, carry, and stock sales for a defined period. A founder who'd been pricing flights to Zurich took a meeting, showed the letter to her board, and paused her move. The rate hadn't changed. The risk had. Predictability is a magnet. States are getting in the fight. Ohio rolled out targeted clinician recruitment by partnering with universities and hospital systems. J1 waiver pathways with faster adjudication and relocation support for families. 2023-2024 program enhancements. Arizona doubled its R&D credit and linked it to job creation, not just spend, then built a one-stop desk that actually answered CFOs' questions. These aren't giveaways. They're wagers that time to yes can be bought down with competence. School choice is creeping in as a retention tool. In Milwaukee, a charter operator opened a STEM campus in a transit-rich corridor with guaranteed seats for children of critical workers, nurses, cops, teachers. The district grumbled. Families enrolled. A pediatric resident who'd wait a move signed her next-year contract because the bus route and bell schedule fit her shift. That's how cities keep talent, by aligning schedules, not just slogans. Public-private accelerators can fix dead downtowns when they're real partnerships. In Denver, a conversion authority pre-cleared a handful of buildings for residential by handling the unglamorous bits, egress, code overlays, financing stacks. It committed city equity, not just zoning waivers, and hired a lender who could underwrite risk. 2 towers lit up with residents ahead of schedule. Street-level retail followed people like it always does. Downtown conversions done right have a pattern. Pick viable buildings, fund the gap, simplify the code path, and stage occupancy in months, not years. Philadelphia tested this quietly with a limited pool of grants that only paid on delivery. The message: no renderings, just keys. A developer took the terms, got units online, and the grocery under them finally penciled. Residents moved in, sidewalks filled, the bus stop mattered again. Case snippets matter because they spread. A biotech in San Diego that once swore off local permits tried a new concierge desk and cleared a lab expansion in 10 weeks. A restaurateur in Atlanta used a city-run design review day that slashed 3 iterations into 1. A fintech in Miami got a written ruling in 2 weeks that used to take 2 quarters. These are green shoots. They signal that competence isn't extinct. But there's a clock mismatch. Reform clocks tick in budget cycles and RFP timelines. Capital clocks tick in payroll and product sprints. A founder with 9 months of runway can't wait for next spring's legislative fix. A police chief can't rebuild trust with a press release. A superintendent can't conjure teachers mid-year. Cities that know this borrow speed, temporary liaisons, borrowed inspectors, private scheduling layers, while reforms build under them. Constraint forces choices. Some reforms die on contact with reality. Pension obligations don't bend. Debt service won't shrink because you wish it. That's why successful counterplays focus on the tractable: permits, policing posture, school seats, tax letters, conversion pipelines. You don't solve everything. You stop the bleed where you can quickly. 2 stories anchor the hope. In Milwaukee, a near-fiscal collapse city stabilized by renegotiating with the state for revenue authority, locking pension discipline, and building a safety surge around bus lines. Services stopped shrinking. People noticed. In New York, a credit downgrade stung, but a hard pivot on office safety, an aggressive illegal vending cleanup, and targeted incentives for life sciences kept a few anchor tenants from leaving. Those tenants kept thousands of jobs. Not a renaissance, an arrest. Reform isn't a speech. It's a calendar invite that doesn't slip, an inspector who texts back, a cop walking the same block daily, a principal calling with a seat, a letter that binds the tax office to its word. Fight back with time. Where cities do that, the exit's slow. Where they don't, the market will write the next chapter without them. Two futures, the fork in the road. Everything we've seen points to a split screen. On the left, the slow bleed. On the right, the snapback. Both start with the same facts: vacancies high, services strained, trust thin. What changes is how fast a city buys back time and whether its promises stick. The slow bleed looks orderly until it is. Downtowns keep half their lights on. Property tax appeals dribble through. Transit trims headways, then routes. Libraries shave Sundays. Police shifts shuffle without enough new recruits. Teachers hold classes together with subs and goodwill. Each cut is temporary, then permanent. Families who can move do. The middle stays longer, but budgets turn that loyalty into a penalty. Fees rise, lines lengthen, inspections slip. Bond desks nudge ratings down again. Conversion dreams pile up against code walls and capital costs. Crime is not a wave. It's a draft under the door that changes behavior: earlier closings, fewer late buses, fewer diners. A city becomes livable for many, intolerable for the people who make it dynamic. 5 years on, the core is smaller, the periphery more brittle, and the young, ambitious look elsewhere. The bleed isn't collapse. It's a recalibration downward that's hard to reverse. The snapback starts with fewer speeches and more clocks. Permits get a real single window, staffed and timed. Inspectors show up with checklists that match the code online. A chief puts officers back on the same blocks at the same hours and publishes burglary clearance rates weekly. A tax office issues binding letters within 30 days, no surprises later. A superintendent opens seats where the jobs are and aligns bell schedules with hospital shifts. A conversion authority picks 5 buildings that pencil and funds the gap, then moves keys into hands in under a year. This isn't magic. It's administrative competence turned into momentum. Confidence creeps back the same way fear did, through routines. Snapback demands a second, harder tier: housing abundance. If zoning still treats growth like a negotiable favor, speed dies again. Cities that turn entire corridors into by right mid-rise with simple design rules see cranes move in months, not decades. Pair that with pre-approved plans, utility coordination, and fixed timelines, and units arrive where the jobs are. Rents settle not because of a press release, but because supply shows up on time. Founders who were leaving to protect teams reconsider when their senior engineer can find a family unit near a good school without a bidding war. Safety must hold. A 6-month blitz that fades breeds cynicism. A 2-year trend builds trust. It's not just cops. Lighting, trash pickup, code enforcement on nuisances, mental health teams that show up each as a tile in the mosaic of normal. Downtowns need visible wins: a block with 3 conversions, a grocery opening under new residents, a transit line with 15-minute service all day. People return when their bodies believe the signal. Tax certainty isn't a rate war, it's the absence of ambush. Publish treatment of options, carry RSUs, keep it stable for set periods, reduce audit roulette. Underwrite R&D with clear credits that aren't clawed back on technicalities. If you can't be cheapest, be legible. Legible wins deal flow. The new equilibrium won't look like 2019. Hybrid lives are sticky. That's okay. Cities can thrive with fewer desk days if they become places where people want to be on purpose: dense, safe, fast to navigate, rich in schools and clinics that work. Downtowns shrink, then refill with people, not just offices. Transit serves all-day patterns. Retail matches residents, not badge swipes. Talent will live multi-flag. A founder keeps a home base and 2 operating nodes. A researcher cycles a year in Singapore, a year in Zurich, returns for a grant term if the lab works. A family spends summers in Lisbon, school years in Chicago if the schools are predictable. Cities that accept this and build for it: fast re-entry, seamless visas, frictionless licensing, retain slices of lives instead of demanding all or nothing. There's one wildcard hanging over both paths: AI productivity shocks. If tools make small teams 10 times faster, physical clusters matter differently. Compute access, power price, and regulatory clearance for deployment become the magnets. A city that nails those could flip its fortunes in a cycle. A city that bans first and studies later will watch prototypes ship elsewhere and arrive only as polished imports. What nobody knows: how quickly that curve steepens. If AI compresses timelines, reform clocks must compress too. That means emergency rulemaking with sunsets, pilots with real metrics, escalation desks that answer in days. The advantage moves to places that treat governance like infrastructure, measured, upgraded, and maintained. So which city sits nearest the fiscal edge? The criteria are brutal: vacancies, pension load, debt service, tax mix, outmigration. We'll name it. Not to gloat, so leaders can see the cliff and others can learn where the guardrails failed. Then we'll ask the only question that matters. What does it feel like on the ground when the check finally bounces? The name first to the fiscal cliff. Here's the guardrail test. Start with vacancies, downtown offices sitting dark, retail fading, foot traffic thin. Layer pension load, promises fixed by statute, compounding while payroll shrinks. Add debt service, refinancing in a market that now charges more for risk. Check the tax mix, heavy reliance on volatile sources, light on resilient ones. Finally, outmigration, the taxpayers who pay most leaving first. Stack those 5 and ask which city blinks. Candidates line up. San Francisco took the biggest vacancy hit with property tax appeals stacking and retail softening. Washington lost federal oxygen and saw downgrades. Los Angeles wrestled with wildfire shocks and transit gaps. Houston faces a widening structural deficit. New York carries debt but kept demand in trophy towers and stabilized faster than headlines admit. Each city is stressed, a few look brittle. Chicago, though, sets off every alarm. Downtown vacancy remains stubborn. Property assessments are getting hammered in appeals, and commuters haven't returned at 5-day cadence. The pension load is singular, on the order of the mid-$50 billions in unfunded obligations at the city level as of 2023-2024, plus teacher and retiree health promises that don't shrink when revenues do. Debt service costs climb as ratings soften, and the bill arrives while sales and transfer taxes wobble with slower deal flow. Outmigration has been steady for years, eroding the base that once masked structural gaps. This was the moment everything changed. State policy sweetened police and fire pensions just as investment returns couldn't carry the weight. A pre-2010s sequence with mounting effects visible by 2023-2024. What looked like generosity became arithmetic. A city already juggling legacy liabilities and post-pandemic revenue loss discovered that every new dollar sent backward was a dollar not spent holding services together. Credit analysts didn't need drama, they needed spreadsheets. The outlook moved, the spread widened. Criteria by criteria, it's a harsh picture. Vacancies depress assessed values and cascade into lower comps. Pension costs are inelastic and front-loaded into near-term budgets. Debt service is rising into tighter markets. The tax mix leans on economically sensitive streams, sales, transfer, hotel, at the very moment those streams underperform. And outmigration concentrates the burden on fewer shoulders, accelerating appeals and shrinking the informal cushion of growth. Call it Chicago sits closest to the near-term fiscal cliff, not because others are safe, but because all 5 dials point the same direction at once, and the timing is unforgiving. Solvency on paper can hide timing mismatches, cash is less polite. A missed window on a refinancing, a weaker than expected property roll, a pension contribution that can't slip without legal peril, stack enough and the floor drops. A credible 2024-2025 revenue deal, disciplined pension funding, and faster permitting and safety gains could still bend the curve. Caveats matter. This is scenario, not certainty. A legislative deal that expands revenue authority, a disciplined pension schedule, and a clean, credible plan for office-to-residential conversions could bend the curve. The state can widen the lane, the city can organize time to yes across permits, policing posture, and tax certainty. A few anchor employers recommitting would stabilize blocks. None of that is fantasy. It's hard and it's timed. What it feels like on the ground isn't a headline, it's a Tuesday. A school cancels an after-school program that kept 200 kids safe until 6. A precinct adds a car to nights but loses it on weekends because overtime funding slipped. A neighborhood clinic cuts dental days to once a week. Permits take 3 weeks longer, so a small contractor misses a season. The library stops opening Sundays. Trash gets picked up just later, enough that people notice. Layoffs, if they come, won't start at marble halls. They'll hit the people whose work makes a city run. Seasonal parks crews, permit clerks, 311 operators, rec center coaches, lab techs at the public health department. The faces behind those roles have kids in the same schools, mortgages in the same neighborhoods, side hustles at the same farmers' markets. A reduction in force isn't an abstraction. It's a friend quietly asking if anyone knows who's hiring. Bond language filters into everyday life. Outlook negative becomes a contractor adding 5% to bid risk. A delayed debt sale becomes a hush among department heads who have been told to freeze discretionary spend. A museum that counted on a city grant postpones an exhibit. A festival scales back. A small theater cancels a run. The texture of civic life thins, not from malice, but from math. Meanwhile, conversion dreams meet code reality. A developer with an office tower and good intentions hits plumbing core constraints and seismic retrofits that turn a pro forma to dust. The gap financing isn't there because the general fund can't backstop it, and the state is juggling its own pressures. Two viable buildings convert, then the pipeline stalls. The hope those two created can't carry a district alone. And yet paths out exist. A binding revenue deal with the state tied to hard reforms. Real single window permitting with public KPIs. Safety strategy that holds steady enough to change behavior. A conversion authority that funds the gap, pays on delivery, and picks buildings that pencil. A tax letter program that takes ambush off the table for founders and funds. If those arrive fast, the cliff becomes a ramp. If they don't, gravity does its work. This isn't a verdict on a city's soul. It's an alarm about its clock. Because elsewhere, incentive machines are still humming, visas are still clearing in weeks, and capital is still routing through places where the answer comes on time. If Chicago can buy back time, it can buy back people. If it can't, people will keep buying time somewhere else. The deeper meaning, what this exodus signals. Underneath taxes and visas is trust. People are moving toward competent time, systems that keep their word, clocks that align with real life. Mobility turns citizens into customers, and the jurisdictions that respect time are winning their business. The lesson is quiet. When basic functions wobble, the best leave first, and their departure teaches everyone else what working looks like. Then the pull compounds. Governance is now a product. Speed and certainty are its features. If you want the builders, stop wasting their hours. They're voting with itineraries. Mobility is the vote you can't gerrymander. It counts in payroll, not precincts. Subscribe to see the counter strategies that actually slow exits, and watch our companion piece on the rising hubs reshaping capital and careers, with 2024-2025 playbooks from the winning jurisdictions.